For as long as I can remember, my older sister Emily was the person I trusted most in the world. She was 3 years older than me, and growing up, she was my role model. She was the one who taught me how to put on eyeliner, how to talk to boys without looking awkward, and how to stand up for myself when people at school tried to push me around. If something happened in my life, good or bad, she was always the first person I'd run to. People used to joke that we were the inseparable sisters because we did everything together. When I graduated college, she was in the front row cheering the loudest. When I landed my first job, she posted about it everywhere, saying how proud she was of me. I never once questioned her loyalty. I honestly thought she'd always have my back no matter what. That's why, when I started telling her about my dreams of getting promoted to a senior position at work, I thought she'd be my biggest cheerleader. I work at a marketing firm, and last year, my boss announced that there would be an opening for a senior manager. I'd been with the company for 4 years, consistently getting great performance reviews, and my boss had even hinted a few times that I was a strong candidate. I was nervous but also excited. It felt like everything I'd been working for was finally within reach. Emily was the first person I told. She smiled, hugged me, and said, "That's amazing. You'd be perfect for it." She even offered to help me practice for the interview when the time came. At the time, I thought that was just her being her usual supportive self. But looking back, there were little signs I missed. For one, she started asking a lot of specific questions about the job, things like salary, benefits, who I'd be working closely with, and what kind of projects I'd handle. I didn't think much of it because we'd always shared details about our work lives. I knew she wasn't completely happy at her job in retail management, so I figured she was just curious. I had no idea she was planning something else entirely. A month later, my company posted the official listing for the senior manager position. I applied immediately and told Emily the good news. She seemed excited, but I noticed she didn't ask me to practice for the interview like she'd promised. Instead, she asked questions about the application process, like whether it was internal only or if external candidates could apply. Again, I didn't think much of it. Then, about 2 weeks before my interview, I bumped into one of my coworkers, Sarah, who casually mentioned that she'd met my sister. I was confused. Why would my coworker meet Emily? Sarah explained that Emily had come into the office to drop off her resume. My stomach sank. I laughed it off in front of Sarah, saying maybe Emily was just visiting me and happened to hand it in. But inside, I felt this horrible twisting feeling. When I got home that night, I confronted Emily about it. She didn't deny it. She told me she'd seen the job listing online and decided she might as well apply too. She said it wasn't personal and that it was just friendly competition. I was stunned. This wasn't a random stranger, this was my sister, the person I'd trusted with everything. She knew how much this promotion meant to me, and now she was trying to take it for herself. I told her I felt betrayed, but she brushed it off, saying, "If you're the better candidate, you'll get it." Simple as that. It was the first time I'd ever felt like she was rooting against me instead of for me. I didn't sleep much that night. For the first time in my life, I started wondering if my sister had always been this way and I'd just been too naive to see it. After that night, something between us shifted. I couldn't talk to her the same way anymore. Every time I looked at Emily, I kept hearing her voice saying, "If you're the better candidate, you'll get it," like we were suddenly rivals instead of sisters. I tried to keep my focus on preparing for the interview, but it was impossible not to think about her doing the same thing behind my back. At work, I overheard little snippets of conversation from colleagues saying things like, "Emily seemed really sharp," or "Your sister has a lot of charisma." They didn't know the full story, but hearing them compliment her made my stomach knot even tighter. I kept telling myself that my years of experience with the company gave me the advantage, but I also knew Emily was charming and quick-witted, two things that often win people over in interviews. The day of my interview finally came. I wore my best blazer, practiced my answers in the mirror that morning, and walked into the conference room feeling cautiously confident. But as soon as I sat down, I noticed something strange. The panel seemed distracted. They were polite, but I could feel that something was off. My boss asked me questions that felt unusually pointed, almost as if they were trying to catch me off guard. It wasn't until halfway through that I realized why. They were referencing ideas and project proposals I'd shared only with Emily during our practice sessions. She had used my ideas in her own interview. I left that room with a sick feeling in my chest. It was like my own words had been turned against me. That night, I couldn't hold back. I called her and asked point blank if she'd repeated my ideas. She didn't even bother denying it. She laughed and said, "Well, you were the one who told me them. You can't claim ownership over every thought you've ever had." I couldn't believe her audacity. It wasn't just that she'd applied, it was that she'd stolen my work to boost her chances. I didn't even know how to process it. My parents found out soon after, but instead of siding with me, they told me I was being too sensitive and that Emily has a right to go after opportunities too. That cut deeper than I expected. I'd always thought my family would see the truth if something like this happened, but instead, they treated it like a harmless sibling rivalry. I started avoiding family dinners because I couldn't stomach sitting next to her while she smiled like nothing was wrong. A week later, the decision came in. HR called me into the office and told me they'd gone in a different direction. I felt my throat close up. I asked who got the job, even though I already knew the answer. It was Emily. She got the position I had been working toward for years, the position she wouldn't have even known about if I hadn't told her. She texted me later that day saying, "No hard feelings, okay," as if that would magically erase the betrayal. But the worst part wasn't even losing the job, it was realizing that my sister had never been the person I thought she was. The days after Emily got the job were some of the hardest I've ever had at work. She didn't just get hired, she became my boss. Yes, the girl who grew up sharing clothes with me and stealing my makeup was now sitting in a corner office making decisions that directly affected my projects. The first time I had to send her an email for approval, I stared at the screen for 5 minutes, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. It felt humiliating. And she didn't make it any easier. At first, she acted overly sweet, like she was going out of her way to prove we were still cool. She'd walk past my desk and say things like, "Hey sis, great work on that presentation," loud enough for everyone to hear, as if we were the perfect supportive siblings. But when it came to actual work matters, she started making subtle digs, asking me to redo things I knew were already good, assigning me extra tasks last minute, or forgetting to tell me about important meetings until it was almost too late. It was the kind of behavior that wouldn't get her in trouble but would slowly wear me down. I tried to keep my head down and just do my job, but it was like she was testing how far she could push me before I snapped. My coworkers, who used to be friendly, started acting differently too. Some were overly nice, clearly trying not to get on the bad side of the new manager. Others avoided me, maybe because they didn't want to get caught in the middle of whatever they suspected was going on. I felt isolated in a place that used to feel like my second home. Outside of work, things weren't much better. My parents kept bringing up how proud they were of Emily for making such a big career move. It didn't matter that she'd stepped on me to get there, they saw it as ambition, not betrayal. When I tried to explain how much she'd hurt me, my mom said, "Honey, sometimes life just works out that way. You'll get your turn." My dad chimed in with, "Maybe it's a sign you should be aiming for something different." They didn't get it. It wasn't just about the job, it was about trust, about knowing the person I'd relied on for years had no problem taking something from me if it benefited her. Then came the incident that broke whatever was left of our relationship. We were working on a big client pitch together. Well, technically, it was my pitch, but because she was my manager, she was overseeing it. I spent 2 weeks perfecting every slide, rehearsing every point. The night before the presentation, she called me into her office to go over the deck. By the time she was done, more than half of my ideas were gone, replaced with concepts I'd never even heard her talk about before. The next day, she delivered the pitch herself, without me in the room, and took full credit when the client signed on. When I confronted her later, she said, "I'm your boss now, I can't give you credit for everything. That's just how corporate works." That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was who she was now. She wasn't my sister in this context, she was someone who would climb over anyone to get higher, even if it meant crushing me in the process. I stopped talking to her outside of work. I stopped answering her texts unless they were directly related to a task. At family gatherings, I was polite but cold. She noticed, of course, and started playing the victim. I don't know why she's so upset with me. I overheard her tell our aunt at Thanksgiving. I thought she'd be happy for me. That was the final twist of the knife, making me out to be bitter and petty while she played the innocent. But the truth was, I wasn't just bitter. I was heartbroken. I had lost not just a job, but my faith in the person I thought would always be in my corner. And the worst part? I didn't know if I'd ever be able to get that back. After the Thanksgiving incident, something inside me snapped. I realized that waiting for Emily to apologize or even acknowledge what she'd done was pointless. She had built a new version of herself where she was the hero of her own story, and in that version, I was just a jealous sister who couldn't handle her success. I decided if she was going to treat me like an obstacle, I'd stop acting like an ally. At work, I started keeping every idea to myself, documenting everything, and communicating only through email so there'd be a paper trail. If she wanted to sabotage me, she'd have to work a lot harder for it. It wasn't easy, though. Emily had a way of making me look bad without doing anything overtly wrong. She'd delay approvals so my projects missed deadlines, then casually mention in meetings that I'd seemed to be struggling with time management. She'd change my assignments without telling me, then act surprised when I didn't deliver what she'd asked for. It was exhausting, but I refused to quit. If I left, she'd win twice, once by taking my job and again by driving me out. Then, in early spring, I got a surprising opportunity. A senior executive from another department reached out, saying he'd noticed my work on a recent campaign and wanted me to join his team for a major company rebranding project. It was exactly the kind of high-visibility work that could put me back on track for a promotion. The only problem? He'd need Emily's approval to transfer me. I knew she wouldn't give it willingly. And I was right. When the executive put in the request, she denied it, claiming my current workload was too important to reassign. When I asked her about it, she smiled and said, "It's nothing personal, I just think you're more valuable here." I wanted to scream. She wasn't keeping me because she valued me, she was keeping me because she didn't want me to outshine her somewhere else. That's when I decided to stop playing fair. I reached out to the executive privately and told him the truth, that Emily and I were sisters, that she'd taken my promotion, and that she was blocking my career progress. I wasn't sure how he'd react, but to my relief, he didn't seem shocked. In fact, he told me he'd heard some things and that if I could keep my current work running smoothly, he'd find a way to bring me over without her approval. For the first time in months, I felt hope. Over the next few weeks, I worked harder than ever, delivering flawless results and making sure every success was visible to upper management. I didn't brag, but I also didn't hide my contributions. I could tell Emily noticed, her comments in meetings became sharper, her tone colder. Then, one Friday afternoon, everything came to a head. We were in a meeting with senior leadership when the executive announced that I'd be joining the rebranding project effective immediately. The room went silent for a moment before people started congratulating me. I glanced at Emily, and for the first time, I saw her mask slip. She wasn't smiling. Her jaw was tight, her eyes cold. She didn't say congratulations. She just sat there, staring at me like she was trying to figure out how I'd pulled it off. Walking out of that room, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. I'd finally broken free from her control, but I knew this wasn't the end. Emily wasn't the type to let something go, and I could feel in my bones that she was already planning her next move. The first week on the rebranding project felt like I could finally breathe again. I was surrounded by new colleagues who respected my input, and the work itself was exciting and fast-paced. For a little while, I even managed to forget about Emily, until she reminded me that she wasn't done with me yet. It started small. An email from her accidentally went to the wrong recipient, leaking internal notes about my supposed tendency to overcomplicate campaigns. Then a rumor reached me that I'd been difficult to manage in my previous role, which was laughable because my performance reviews had always been excellent. I knew exactly where it was coming from, but I had no proof. Emily was careful. She never said anything directly that could be traced back to her, she just planted seeds and let them grow. One afternoon, my new manager called me in for a chat. He said he'd heard mixed feedback and wanted to make sure I was adjusting well. I reassured him I was fine, but inside I was furious. I had worked so hard to escape her shadow, and she was still trying to pull me down from another floor. I decided to fight back, but this time I'd do it her way, subtly. I started collecting everything. Every email, every Slack message, every tiny instance where she crossed a line. I even asked a few trusted coworkers to keep an ear out for anything unusual. Over time, a pattern began to emerge, and I could see her strategy clearly. She wanted to poison my reputation just enough so that, when review season came, I'd be passed over for any promotion or bonus. It was calculated and methodical. But she underestimated me. When our company's annual leadership summit rolled around, I knew it was my chance to show the right people what I could do. My team and I were responsible for presenting the first phase of the rebranding project, and I threw myself into making it unforgettable. I stayed late every night, rehearsing, fine-tuning the visuals, and preparing for every possible question. On the day of the presentation, I walked into the room full of executives and industry guests, and I saw Emily sitting in the back. Of course she was there. Her eyes followed me the whole time, like she was waiting for me to trip up. But I didn't. The presentation went flawlessly, and when it was over, the CEO himself shook my hand and told me it was visionary. I could practically feel Emily's glare burning into my back as people congratulated me. Later that evening, I got an email from HR saying they wanted to meet with me the following week to discuss future leadership opportunities. I didn't need to read between the lines, I knew what that meant. I was finally being considered for the kind of role Emily had taken from me before. That night, I got a text from her, "You think this is over?" It's not. No emoji, no fake sweetness. Just a threat in plain words. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding, and realized she wasn't just angry. She saw me as an enemy now. And if she was willing to steal my promotion once, I had no doubt she'd try to take this one too, maybe in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. The week leading up to my meeting with HR felt like walking through a minefield. I could sense Emily lurking in the background, waiting for her moment. I tried to stay focused on my work, but little disruptions kept happening. Files I'd saved to the shared drive went missing. Meeting invites I was supposed to receive never showed up in my inbox. At first, I thought it was technical glitches, but then one of my teammates quietly told me they'd seen Emily in the project folder late at night, moving things around. That was the moment I knew, she wasn't going to just sit back and watch me succeed. She was going to sabotage me, no matter how low she had to go. 2 days before the HR meeting, it happened. I came into work to find an email thread forwarded to the CEO, supposedly from me, trash-talking members of my rebranding team and mocking our clients. My name was in the sender field, my signature at the bottom, but I had never written a word of it. I felt sick. It was a perfect trap. If the CEO believed it, my career here was over before it even hit its peak. Luckily, I had been documenting everything for months, including suspicious logins to my accounts. IT was able to trace the email's origin, and guess whose credentials had been used? Emily's. She'd been dumb enough to send it from her work laptop while logged into the system. When I confronted her, she didn't look guilty, she looked furious that she'd been caught. You think this proves anything? She hissed. No one will believe you. You're just bitter. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just forwarded the IT report to HR. The next morning, they called me in, not to talk about the leadership position, but to inform me they were opening an investigation into Emily's conduct. I could see the shock on her face when she was escorted out of the building later that afternoon. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. This was my sister. The girl I used to stay up late with, watching movies and whispering about our dreams. And now she was the person who had tried to destroy me. That Friday, HR officially offered me the promotion. They said my work on the rebranding project had been exceptional and that my leadership potential was exactly what the company needed. I accepted, but I didn't celebrate. Because even as I moved into my new office, I knew the damage Emily had done wasn't just professional, it was personal, and it couldn't be undone. She stopped speaking to me entirely. Our parents were devastated and blamed me for ruining her career, refusing to believe the evidence. Family gatherings turned into tense, silent meals where no one made eye contact. I had won the battle, but I'd lost my sister for good. And deep down, I wasn't sure it had been worth it. It's been 6 months since Emily was fired, and life feels both lighter and heavier at the same time. Professionally, I'm thriving. My new role comes with more responsibility, more recognition, and a team that genuinely respects me. I've led 2 successful campaigns and even spoken at a national marketing conference, things I used to dream about back when I was just another name in the company directory. But none of it feels quite the way I imagined. Because every time I hit a milestone, a small part of me wishes I could share it with the sister who used to be my biggest supporter. We haven't spoken since the day she left the building, and I doubt we ever will. Our parents still treat me like I betrayed her, no matter how many times I've tried to explain the truth. They tell me family should stick together, but what they don't understand is that family isn't just about blood, it's about trust. And once trust is gone, you can't just patch it up like nothing happened. I've replayed everything in my head so many times, wondering if there was a point where I could have stopped it from spiraling. Maybe if I'd seen the signs earlier. Maybe if I'd confronted her sooner. But the truth is, I think this was always in her. The ambition, the competitiveness, the willingness to take something if she thought she could get away with it. I just didn't want to believe it because she was my sister. I've learned a lot from all of this, lessons I wish I didn't have to learn. I've learned to protect my work, to trust actions more than words, and to never assume someone's loyalty just because they've been close to you in the past. I've learned that sometimes the people you expect to catch you when you fall are the ones who push you in the first place. And I've learned that winning isn't always as sweet when you lose something bigger along the way. People at work still ask about Emily sometimes, and I give the same answer every time: she's doing her own thing now. I don't tell them the whole story. Not because I want to protect her, but because I've made peace with the fact that the truth is mine to carry. She has her version, I have mine, and the people who matter know what really happened. The other day, I found an old photo of us from when I graduated college, her arms around me, both of us smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. I stared at it for a long time before putting it back in the drawer. That girl in the picture was my best friend. My sister. And she's gone now, not because she died, but because she chose ambition over family. Maybe one day I'll stop missing her. Maybe one day she'll realize what she lost. But until then, I'll keep moving forward, carrying the reminder that even the people closest to you can take your place if you leave the door open. And I'll make sure that door stays locked from now on.